Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham here on the Jerry Ratcliffe Show with Jerry Ratcliffe. And we've got some news to talk about this week. No Virginia basketball games to talk about until with the Cavaliers off until Saturday with the midweek bye. But we got some football news we'll get into. Maybe start there first. Jerry, first off, hope things are going well for you over on the other side of the mountain from me.
Yeah, everything's fine, Chris. It was strange this time of year not having a game this week until this coming Saturday. So time to catch your breath a little bit, but not a lot of news going on this week. But everything's fine. I hope it is on your side of the mountain.
It is. From here on out, it's a sprint because with this midweek bye, now we go back to weekend game, midweek game, all the way through to the ACC tournament and to at least the first Thursday or Friday of the NCAA tournament. So that's we got it was our chance to recharge our batteries. But that's basketball talk. We'll save that towards the second part of the show here. The not a lot of football news, but some rather big football news this week. Virginia losing longtime wide receivers coach and alum, undergrad, master's degree from UVA. He's married to a UVA alum. Marques Hagans is leaving. He coached under three Virginia football head coaches, Mike London, Bronco Mendenhall, 1 year of Tony Elliott. He is heading to Penn State to take a similar job. Lateral move in one sense, but in another sense, that's a big time program to be the wide receivers coach at. So we're losing Marques, but I guess the UVA part of us has to say that's a big move for him, big step for him, big step forward for him.
It absolutely is, Chris. And as you and I were talking before we went on air, it's a great step toward his future. Certainly being a wide receivers coach and offensive recruiting coordinator at a place like Penn State, perennial, football power. It's good, looks good on your resume. And, as being an associate head coach at Virginia, that was one thing that Tony Elliott did for him. It was nice because usually when you bear that title in a program, it kind of helps you going forward toward becoming a head coach somewhere. So having that title on his resume, then being at Penn State, only greases the rails a little bit in terms of a future head coaching job, which I'm sure he's interested in and should be at some point in his career. He's a young guy and has a great history in football. We virtually saw him grow up before our very eyes, Chris. I remember the first time I ever heard Marques Hagans' name, and I've said it on this program before. I was sitting in the Hampton High School legendary coach Mike Smith's office. I was on a recruiting trip with Danny Wilmer. Not sure I was supposed to be there, but I was. And Danny was telling Mike, he says, we need a quarterback. We need somebody that can help us beat Florida State. That's the kind of players we're looking for. And Mike Smith said, well, the best damn athlete in the state of Virginia is right there under your nose at Fork Union, Marques Hagans. And Danny promptly went back to Charlottesville and went out to Fork Union, where he had close ties with John Schumann, the terrific head coach out there. And Hagans had committed to Indiana. Indiana was recruiting him to become the next Randall L., who was a terrific player at Indiana and went on and became a terrific slot receiver or wide receiver at for the Steelers. And Danny Wilmer, being the great recruiter he was, convinced Hagans that he should be at Virginia instead of Indiana, and got Marques to flip and come to Virginia as a wide receiver, punt returner, that sort of thing, and backup quarterback. And We saw him play really well as a receiver. I think maybe a little bit as a defensive back and a punt returner early in his career here, and then was a backup quarterback. And early, I guess it was probably Marcus's sophomore year, Matt Schaub's junior year. Matt didn't play particularly well in a game, and Al Grode decided to bench Matt Schaub, and Matt Schaub will still tell you to this day. In fact, I saw him a few weeks ago, and he said he pointed to that as sort of the turnaround in his career at Virginia. He got benched, and Marques Hagans went up to Western Michigan. I covered that game and was terrific and helped Virginia win a pretty high scoring game at Western Michigan. And then I think Schaub started the next week and ended up being ACC Offensive Player of the Year and beating out Phillip Rivers for that honor. And we know what Matt Schaub went on to be as a Virginia quarterback, record setting, and then with Houston Texans, Atlanta Falcons twice. And Marques Hagans went on and did help Virginia beat Florida State in 2005 in one of the great upsets in Virginia history. And we'll still never forget Bobby Bowden saying after that game, we just couldn't stop that dadgum number 18. And that was Marques Hagans, who I think had around 400 yards total offense that night and was just unstoppable. But didn't mean to rattle on, but I have so much admiration for Marques Hagans and what he was as a player and what he's been as a coach and a mentor to these kids, not just on the field, but off the field. It's easy to go on and on and on about him.
Well, and then he was in the NFL for parts of 6 seasons. He ended up going back to wide receiver and played in the NFL with a few teams. St. Louis Rams drafted him. He was with them for, I think, 3 years. Came back to Virginia then as a grad assistant. And I mentioned he was a coach under Mike London, and then he stayed around for Bronco Mendenhall, stayed for the entire Mendenhall regime, and hung around for the first year of Tony Elliott. So, I mean, it's rare to see an assistant coach, a position coach particularly, stay around through one coaching change, much less two. And I think that speaks to the quality of coach, quality of man that Marques Hagans is, and what he meant to the Virginia program, both as a player, alum, and as a coach. And so in that sense, it's a huge loss. In that sense alone, it's a huge loss for Virginia. Then just the fact that, I mean, look at the productivity he had on the field with his receivers, guys who came in not necessarily highly recruited, who he turned into NFL caliber players. And then his value as a recruiter. Penn State recognizes that. They've made him the offensive recruiting coordinator, as you mentioned. And Penn State already owns the state of Virginia, at least as far as the top talent in Virginia goes from a recruiting standpoint. They can't own it anymore, but they've got Marques Hagans, who's an ace recruiter here, that will just give them even more of a stranglehold on Virginia prep recruiting. So, I mean, it's a loss for Virginia in the sense that we're losing a great guy like Marques Hagans, but then we're losing a great coach and a great recruiter as well.
Yeah, no question. And you're exactly right about how rare it is for a guy to survive one coaching change, let alone be on 3 consecutive coaching staffs. And we heard Tony Elliott say it early on after he became head coach here, that if there's one guy you got to keep on this staff, it's Marques Hagans. And we all knew why. We've had Marques on our podcast before, and just talking more about just how he believes in the young men in the program and how he helps mentor them off the field, and the respect that he has from his players. He's going to be sorely missed just as much there as an on the field guy, where he coached 15 of the most 20 productive receivers in UVA history. I mean, look at all the guys he's he's developed unbelievable. A lot of them are making money in the NFL right now, and some of them will be soon. But yeah, he's just part of the fabric of UVA football, and his wife Lauren, what a wonderful person she is, and you know, she's meant a lot to the Virginia football community. And his two kids, they were at practice every time I was ever over there for when media was allowed to go in, and his kids were out there passing the football with the players and stuff. And it's interesting that he'll be reunited with Anthony Poindexter up at Penn State. One of Marcus's son is named after Chris Long and Anthony Poindexter. Christopher Dex, I think, is one of his kids' names. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes in the future as well. If Poindexter goes somewhere and takes Marcus with him as part of his staff, should Anthony move along,
I think it could go the other way too.
or vice versa. Yeah,
One of those guys is going to be one of those guys, or both those guys can be a head coach at some point in the next few years, and whichever the first one is going to. I would think there could be a possibility they would take the other one with them. Dex could take Biscuit as his offensive coordinator, and Hagans could take Dex as his defensive coordinator. So there's a there's a chance we're going to see those two guys working together again, not just at Penn State, but somewhere else. Hey, who knows? Maybe Virginia one day. So that's the football news of the week. Yeah, not a lot else going on. We've been scanning the transfer portal. No news there. No prep news. So, but that's a big gap right there. Big hole to fill for Virginia football. So I guess we'll go back to Virginia basketball now. The Cavaliers are 6th in the coaches poll, 7th in the EP poll. With the midweek off, a chance to, lick the wounds a little bit, get some guys who are maybe dinged up a little bit of rest, some rehab, et cetera, and Boston College then coming in Saturday, and then a quick turnaround Monday night with going to Syracuse. So you got the Saturday Monday turnaround. That's the payback for getting the midweek off, is you got two games in 3 days after that. I guess some of the news this week, Jerry, from Tony Bennett's Monday ACC teleconference, one of the things that emerged from there was just him talking about the change in lineup with Ben Vanderplas now the starter at the center, and it seems like he's pretty well entrenched there at the center. And a reporter asked Tony about Caden Shedrick, who had been the starter for much of this season and much of last season, and Francisco Gaffara, who started a little bit, a good bit last season as well, and was the backup this year for quite a while. Neither of them getting a lot of minutes right now. But Tony, didn't basically say that they're in any kind of doghouse. He just said that they need to be ready to play in the event that their names are called upon.
Yeah, and we've seen Tony do this before, where he has put guys essentially reduce their playing time, but they've come back in games and played key roles in them winning. We've seen that throughout his career here. This is no different. There's times, I'm sure there's going to be times down the second half of the season, which will start Monday night at Syracuse, when both Poppy and Shedrick are going to be needed. And I'm sure these guys will be ready. I would think. I mean, that's Virginia has a history of that, of guys being ready to come in and fill those roles when needed. But in the meantime, the small lineup is really working well. Virginia's on a 5-game winning streak. They're scoring a lot of points. That win at Wake Forest was as impressive a win as I think they've had this season. They were just really good on both ends of the floor against a pretty hard team to beat at home. I mean, Wake Forest had won 28 of their last 30 home games, including 15 in a row, and all 10 this season. It's a tough place to play, and Steve Forbes has done a great job in turning that program around down there. And not only was Vanderplas impressive, and Gardner, even though Gardner's had his time diminished a little bit too, but Ryan Dunn, the fabulous freshman, has really come on strong. I think he had 30 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, against the Deeks. Pretty effective minutes, and he might be ready to start himself. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. He's certainly going to get a lot of playing time, I think, the second half of the season. And we all kind of saw it coming early on. He had flashes of brilliance, so to speak, and then was just kind of biding his time. But he's not a freshman anymore after you played half of the season in the ACC. He's been around a little bit and is a strong contributor, as a rebounder, a defensive player, and he has shown us that he can score as well if he needs to. And very complete kind of player is what Tony likes to refer to them as. Is they can get it done on all levels of their game, and that's what he's been able to do. I think we'll see a lot more of him heading down the second half of the season, Chris.
He's already finishing games out. The last 3 games he's been on the floor at the key moment. So, whether he starts or not, but then, I think that I agree. I did a piece looking at the analytics of it. Virginia has been better with him on the floor the last few weeks. And, if it ends up that he's a starter, it would give Tony Bennett, he's basically to a 7-man rotation now. If his 2 guys off the bench were Isaac McNeely, the guard, who has obvious pop from the perimeter, and then his guy in the post was Jaden Gardner, you would bring 2 offensive minded guys in off the bench that could give you an injection of something there. That would be kind of unique to see from any lineup, much less a Virginia lineup, to have 2 guys who can score points in bunches for you coming off the bench.
Absolutely. And I like the way Tony has handled this with Shedrick as well. I mean, it's tough to see a guy who started the season as a starter and was getting major minutes have his time reduced like that. And I think Tony said it best, that he addressed it in front of the team. Because a lot of times when things go unsaid, it can develop a lot of problems without the team. People are whispering, there's outside rumors, blah, blah, blah. He addressed it head on in front of the team. And I think Shedrick probably appreciated that. And he said opportunities will come. And so, as we mentioned before, I'm sure they will. But I like the way he handled that. And that's one of the things that Tony said he doesn't like about being a head coach, is that you got to make personnel decisions like that. And it affects people. It's part of their lives and part of who they are. And it's never easy. But I admire the way he handles these kind of situations head on, instead of dancing around it or trying to brush it under the carpet. But you're right. Having Gardner and McNeely coming off the bench are very offensive minded guys. And wow, McNeely's been on a tear lately, just like we thought he would. He's shooting around 56% on his threes the last 6 or 7 games, I think. And like Jim Larinaga said early on, in that game where McNeely missed a few, he said every time he put one up, I was kind of wincing or didn't want to look, because it looked like even if they didn't go in, that they were going to go in. And that's the way his shots are. If he hardly ever clangs one, and the guy's on fire. What can I say? And that's exactly what we thought he would be. He's only going to get better and better as we head down the second half of this season.
I have him 12 for 21 in the last 5, 57.1% since the Syracuse game, the 5-game winning streak. The 5-game winning streak. And with the small lineup, and it was a small lineup, it's got 2 6'8" guys as the key guys. That's not, but that's what we call a small lineup. NBA teams use small lineups a lot these days too. But with the small lineup, there's more penetration, dribble penetration by, Kihei Clark and Reese Beekman and Armand Franklin. And, they're pitching out to guys if guys help out to stop their penetration. There's McNeely, or there's Franklin, or there's Beekman. All those guys can make threes. And so I think that's why we're seeing McNeely's numbers go up, is because he's getting more clean looks, and you can't give him a clean look. So what I like about the idea of Gardner coming off the bench is just that, again, not just that he's generically a good offensive player, but he's a different look. I mean, the reason I think he doesn't end up starting as this season rolls on for Virginia is his game is very different than the other guys' games, in the sense he's not a 3-point shooter. He's not much of a back to the basket post guy. He's the mid-range guy. He floats around the perimeter, the inside of the perimeter, and he hits the 12 to 15-foot jumper. That's where he feasts. But that would give Virginia something different in the 20, 25 minutes a game he's out there off the bench, as far as that goes. And, yeah, what you said about Shedrick, it reminds me, I'm thinking back, I mean, Evan Nolte comes to mind. Evan Nolte was deep on the bench, talented guy, 4-star recruit, and then, didn't get to play much. And then when Justin Anderson got hurt in the 2015 season, all of a sudden Nolte is not only playing, but he's starting and playing 35 minutes a game. And he did well for a few weeks there and helped Virginia really stabilize themselves. And so if you're Caden Shedrick, if you're Francisco Cafaro, Ben Vanderplas, God forbid, if you're a Virginia fan, something happens to him, or just simple foul trouble. Those guys need to be able to come in. They need to practice so that they're ready to play, and then come in and do what they can do and have a big game. And Virginia not miss a beat. And I think Tony Bennett teams have had a tradition of keeping those guys who are just on the outside of the rotation looking in, ready to play, and they get inserted in. And, for a lot of teams, those guys don't perform well, but for Virginia teams in the past, they have. And so that's Tony's message to those guys. Look, just because you're not getting minutes now doesn't mean we don't, need you down the stretch. There's going to be a game or two that Virginia is going to need Caden Shedrick, maybe Francisco Cafaro as well, to be able to pull out a tight win.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And it could happen at any moment too. I mean, look at the foul trouble that they were in at Wake Forest the other day.
Yeah, exactly.
And, what I liked something Steve Forbes said about that small lineup too, is that he said, I think Virginia's a better offensive team like that, and because you have to guard all 5 players, and that's not necessarily the case. In a lot of teams you play, you can kind of slough off and say, well, we really don't have to guard this guy very much. But against that lineup, there's not a guy on the floor you can leave unguarded. If you do, you're going to pay for it. So I think that's a really smart move on Tony's part as well, is to go with 5 scorers, because they've been such a more of a complete team and a tougher team to beat when they can score the ball. And we saw early on when they were struggling a little bit, they were having a hard time scoring in a couple of those games that they lost. And even in a couple of games since then, they've had these mysterious droughts. In fact, there was one analytical service I saw out there that Virginia, in terms of all the teams, power teams out there, or maybe all the teams in Division I, I'm not sure, but they were in the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the country, and having the most stretches of non-scoring action, or the biggest droughts of any teams in the country. So that's something to be a little concerned about, and maybe one of the reasons why he went to the smaller lineup to try to keep that from happening, because that's a horrible stat.
Yeah.
Being one of the worst teams in the country when it comes to having droughts, long droughts too. We're talking about.
Yeah, I did some analytics of my own. Since he went to that small lineup, 15-12 to go in the second half against North Carolina. points per possession. Virginia is averaging 1.23 points per possession. If that was a season-long number, that'd be number one in the country. They're giving up a little more defensively. But what's interesting, there's a website, evanmaya.com, that I've come across.
That's the one.
That's the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
One of the features on that site's lineup analysis, and you can look at how two players play together all the way up to 5-man lineups. The two best 5-man lineups for Virginia both have Vanderplas playing center. The best one has Dunn playing power forward, and the one with the 4-guard lineup that he used against Carolina and has used at times in the last few games since, with Beekman, Clark, Franklin, McNeely, then around Vanderplas, is actually the best defensive lineup that Virginia has of any lineup they've got. And it would seem counterintuitive at first. There's no shot blocker on the floor. You've got especially the 4-guard lineup. You've got 1 6'8" guy. No one else is over 6'4" on the floor. But they're by far the best defensive lineup Virginia's got. So it's the quality of the players on the floor, probably a little bit, and but those are the two best offensive lineups that Virginia has too, according to evanmaya.com. So it's just fascinating to think that it's Tony says this a lot, and people might get frustrated. He says this all the time. We're still trying to figure out who we are. He'll say, some version of those words. We're trying to figure out who we are. This Virginia team was ranked as high as number 2 in the country. And he didn't discover who they were until that second half of that Carolina game. I really think that what he stumbled onto there by going with that 4-guard lineup around Vanderplas, and of course he's been giving a lot more minutes to Dunn lately. This is the look that this team needs to have as we go to February into March. And I don't know that you would have charted this back in October and November when you're looking ahead to the season. Oh, that's going to be our best lineup. No one would have thought that. But this is probably the best lineup that he's got.
Oh yeah, and I've saw people write that this is the lineup I like. This is their best lineup. Blah blah blah. But yeah, I think you're right. And one of the things I like about Tony Bennett is he doesn't accept that from the beginning of the season. He'll go with what he likes, and then he will tinker and develop players as we go along. And then he's known as a developmental program that makes players better as they go. And I mean, look at that 2019 team. Certainly the lineups they finished with wasn't the lineups they started with. And, why should it be? I think coaches who are fixed on a particular lineup and just do it because it's worked doesn't mean it can't get better. And, get some of these younger players, all they need is time and experience to bring out the best in their game. And when you got the proper coaching, that's going to happen. We've seen coaches, stick with guys too long, and just because they're supposed to be good. We've seen some of their careers take a down plunge, so to speak, because they won't change. They're too stubborn. They think, well, this is the way it's going to be. And I like Tony's open-mindedness about letting players develop and get better as the season goes along. It's not fair to everybody on their team if they're playing better than people ahead of them and just keeping them on the bench. It's just not right. Some players get better, some players don't. Some get worse. And I appreciate the fact that he is a guy that allows that to happen in his program, that he rewards people who are practicing well and playing well.
We've had time this week because there was no game midweek. I went back and looked at the starting lineup for the championship game in 2019. And just to refresh my memory, it was a 4-guard lineup around Mamadi Diakite. The 4 guards were Ty, Jerome, Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter, and Kie Clark. And then it was basically a 6-man rotation. The Braxton Key got 28 minutes off the bench. Jack Salt played 4 minutes. Jay Huff played 3 minutes. but essentially a 6-man rotation with really Braxton Keys, pretty much a big guard. So 5 guards and Mamadi Diakite. And that was the team that won the championship. And that was not the team, as you mentioned, Jerry. That wasn't the team that started that year as a starting lineup in the rotation. That was something that evolved over the season. Tony's great at learning his personnel, reading his personnel, and going with what works. And he may have discovered this he may have discovered this little bit of gold sooner than he did in 2019. That team had a lot of talent, but he discovered the right combination later in that season. But it's been interesting to see how this group has developed. I was going to throw one thing out to you too, Jerry. I know you like when you write your scatter shooting columns, you'll talk about your spies and your sources and that kind of thing. Word got to me this week that the Georgetown point guard who transferred to Virginia, Dante Harris, who's transferred in, he could be eligible. He would be eligible if he wanted to be. He's redshirting this semester, but he's part of the program. He's practicing with the program. The word's gotten out that he is tearing up the scout team. Basically, he as the point guard on the scout team is really making practices much more competitive for the starting lineup and the rotation. And one player saying that basically that is helping make the team better as well, because essentially you got Kihei Clark and Reese Beekman, 2 of the better point guards in the ACC, going up against this guy in practice. And it's almost like he's as good or better than anybody they're going to see in a game. And, I think what I get out of that is that we don't often see this, but it is important to have good quality practices that get you ready for the game action. And, basically, when you start looking back at it, since he's been part of the program, this Virginia team's been pretty good. So that's an unseen part of how this success may be playing out.
Yeah, and excuse me, and look at the guys on that scout team that these guys are going up against. They're going up against Poppy and Shedrick in some cases.
Yeah.
The new kid, also Isaac Trout and Leon Bond.
Leon Bond, yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty good scout team, brother.
Scout team.
I think I could take that team and do fairly well in the ACC with it. But we've seen this before where the scout players make the team better. I mean, look at Sam Hauser a couple of years ago. They couldn't stop him in practice. He was unbelievable. He was shooting lights out of the basket. And so, yeah, these guys are going to make the starters better. They're going to push them in practice every day.
One year, Malcolm Brogdon and Anthony Gill led the scout team.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a pretty good scout team too.
And yeah, I've heard this kid is pretty good. I know I think he played under Curtis Staples at some point. And we all remember how great Curtis was. So yeah, he's one of the refugees of the Georgetown program that Patrick Ewing, I think, ran off. And from what I understand, that's been a problem at Georgetown, where they've run off more talent than they've kept, which might explain why they've been so bad. But their loss is Virginia's gain for sure. And this guy should be a terrific point guard for Virginia's future. And I mean, you look at Hammond, Trout, and Bond will be eligible for next year's team, along with Gertrude and Buchanan coming in. That's 5 pretty solid players joining your team right there.
Yeah, 5 guys that we haven't really seen this year. That will be in addition to what else is coming back next year. That's right. That won't be a bad thing at all for Virginia basketball. So BC is an early tip on Saturday. I'm not sure I like a 12 o'clock Saturday tip, Jerry, but that's what we got. I guess our day will be over early. That's not so bad, but breakfast, it feels like, at JPJ for those of us who are going. We talked a little bit before we hit record. Not a lot about. We've looked into this BC team, and they've won 4 ACC games. I mean, they beat Notre Dame twice. They beat Louisville. They beat Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's better than their 2-7 record. They've got some talent. Virginia's favored big. I think 16, 17 point favorite in this game, depending on who you look at. But BC's got some ACC wins, so and Virginia's coming off the bye, and it's an early start, so maybe that's another factor. This might be competitive for a good bit there, and certainly, there's some talent there at BC. So, any thoughts that you have? I'm trying to do my best there, Jerry, to boost up this BC team.
I mean, it's hard to pay much attention to BC because even their own fans don't pay much attention to them. I've been to games up there where there's practically nobody in the stands. It's not a college town, not a college sports town anyway. BC gets largely ignored by the fans up there, but so not much excitement surrounding that program. And they're on a 2-game winning streak. They beat Notre Dame 84-72 and Louisville 75-65. But for the most part, I know they're a physical team, and they've got some guys that can score in bunches at times, but it's hard to get too excited about BC coming to town because they just haven't been very competitive in the ACC for a while now. But I'm sure Tony has spent most of his time this week just trying to make Virginia better. And again, with a scout team like that, how could you not when you're emphasizing the things that he does in practice? But I'm sure they've spent a little bit of time on BC, but more time on themselves, just trying to improve and moving forward. Because like you said, they got a quick turnaround. Got to go to Syracuse on Monday night, and Syracuse could have easily beaten North Carolina the other night. I watched some of that game, and questionable call there toward the end.
Yeah, you're being nice. I thought they got hosed at the end there.
Yeah, well, they did get hosed at the end. Thought it was a bad call, and
a couple of them. There was the charge call with the flagrant, and then the inbound after that. The Carolina kid flung the Syracuse kid, and he got called for the foul. So yeah. Boeheim, and that was in front of Boeheim. Looked like he just, there was not even a point of arguing. He seemed like he just, okay, this is the ACC. Why did we even join? Why didn't we stay in the Big East?
Yeah, I could read his lips a few times, and he was not happy. But, the old Boeheim would have probably got a technical foul, but I guess when you coach as long as he has, he just uses the BS word and blows the referee off when he comes over to the huddle. But just get away from me. But that won't be an easy game for Virginia. It's although sometimes they've gone into the dome up there and just blown Syracuse out, and that could happen again. They handled Syracuse pretty easily down here until the end, when Syracuse started pressing a little bit, and Virginia went on one of those droughts that we talked about. But Tony, for the large part, has been able to find holes in that 2-3 zone and tear it apart.
Yeah.
And if they can continue to shoot the way they have lately, that could very well be the case again Monday night up in Syracuse, which I don't think I'll be making that trip. I've been up there every time I've gone up there in basketball season. It seems like there's been like 8 feet of snow on the ground. So I think I'm going to try to avoid that one this time.
You don't want to have to live up there for a few weeks after this one's over.
Lord, no. I could not do that.
Well, that's the next two for Virginia. Boston College on Saturday at noon, Monday night as part of the Big Monday with at Syracuse. Go to jerryratcliffe.com for and AugustaFreePress.com for previews of both, and then post game from Boston College, of course. Hey, Jerry, we got to thank the people who helped make this responsible as we're getting ready to wrap up.
Yeah, somebody emailed me the other day and asked if I think I had on this same shirt from one of our sponsors. He says, "Is that a Penn State shirt?" No, it's not a Nittany Lion there. It's a dog. The logo for Roback, our newest sponsor. It's a Charlottesville-based active and sportswear company. Charlottesville people. one of the fastest growing companies in America. If you go on any website, you're probably going to see a million Roback ads, RHOBACK. Incredible clothing, and I've been modeling some of it. They make everything from hoodies to the I think they call these Q zips, men's line and women's line. They're very active in the NIL world and trying to help athletes, including Virginia's Kihei Clark. He's one of their spokespersons. Great clothing, colorful. They got every kind of shirt that you can imagine. It's very comfortable stuff. I don't want to ever take these off. These things are so comfortable, but you owe it to yourself to check them out, and you can do that. Look on our website. It's they have a nice big ad up there with this logo on it, Roback. And if you click on there and order and use the code
Chris Long.
UVA Jerry, it was Chris Long trying to call me. I'll have to call him back real quick. UVA Jerry, you can get 20% off of your first order, and it helps us, and we appreciate it. Also, Aberdeen Barn, best steakhouse in Virginia. Listen to their ad on our show, on the show that we have, and also the Good Feet people at the Good Feet store over at Stonefield. I've had a lot of people that I've referred to go there, and then they tell me it's made a big difference in the discomfort they've had walking or running, and it's helped them a lot. It's helped me walking. I've had some foot issues, and it's helped me with their arches. It's not a shoe store. You can get shoes there, but it's mostly arch supports for your feet that help you run and walk eliminate the discomfort. And also Ragged Mountain Running Shop with Mark and Cynthia Lorenzoni. So please drop by all these sponsors and check out Roback on our website. And they have a lot of stuff, golf clothing too. So if you're a golfer, definitely check it out.
Well, thanks to those sponsors. Thanks to all the sponsors on the website. And thanks to you for listening. And if you have anything you want to look up, go to jerryratcliffe.com, AugustaFreePress.com. And we have everything you want to know and more about UVA sports. For Jerry Ratcliffe, I'm Chris Graham signing off. Everyone have a great day.